Yo, 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 yo. How's it going? JP. It's my DJ name. Today I'm talking about structure in fiction, structure in short story. Structure is one of those difficult things to kind of wrap one's head around. It's taken me a long time. So I'm going to try to keep it simple. I define structure as the way in which a story arranges time and space. Time and space. So let's first talk about time. How does a story pass through time? Does it move forward or does it move backwards? There's a novel by Charles Baxter, actually, who we read, called First Light, and that book moves backwards in time. Or does the work kind of jump around in time? Backwards, forwards, backwards, forwards. Sometimes those kinds of stories don't even keep close track of time. They're not signaling time. And those pieces are, you could call them nonlinear. We haven't really been reading nonlinear fiction. We've been reading fiction that mostly moves forward in time, and on occasion it flashes back. Another way to think about time, at what point do we begin the scene, time-wise, and at what point does the scene end, time-wise? How do we pass through time? Does the story make use of scene, which is a representation of moment by moment action, right? That's an illusion. It's not really moment by moment. It's the writing creates an illusion so that it feels like we're experiencing things moment by moment. Or is the story making use of summary? Is it summarizing large amounts of time? So now I want to talk about space. Space is a little easier to think about. What spaces does physical spaces does the story inhabit? Okay, and in what order? All of the decisions about time and space, the decisions that a writer makes, help the reader to pay attention to what matters in the story. In other words, if a short story makes use of a dramatic scene, which is a representation of moment by moment action, that sort of moment is weighted more. It's asking the reader to pay more attention to what's going on. A nice comparison might be the way you arrange your house. The way you arrange your house creates a lot of meaning. If you put a TV in every room, if there's a TV that's always playing in every single room, it's going to say something about not only the choices, the kind of choices you make, about what you think is important, but it's also going to impact the way you experience the world. Let's just briefly consider a story we read earlier in the quarter called A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor. The story moves in straight linear fashion, right? It begins the night before and ends the next day. It inhabits 4 different physical spaces: the kitchen, family room, the car, the diner, and the ditch on the side of the road. Consider the movement of space and what it says about the fate of those characters. For instance, why Flannery O'Connor chose a ditch off the side of a mountain dirt road headed to nowhere. To to think that we move from the very safest place, one's home, one's family home, to this very strange and dangerous and unknown place, right? It says a lot about the character's fates. The other thing to consider is the decision about time. This story just moves straight. It is a straight line in time, right? There are two or three flashbacks and that are sort of memories that the grandmother has, but for the most part it moves straight in time, and it really heightens the fact that these characters are on their way to their deaths. Of course, we don't know that until the very end. The story sort of marches forward very quickly, if that makes sense. And the only flashbacks we're getting are these sort of really nebulous, romantic memories, right? So over the past quarter, we have been talking quite a bit about some of the elements that make fiction short, how writers make things brief. A short story has a tightly focused dramatic conflict, right? It has a single protagonist. It usually has only a single viewpoint character. It passes through a short amount of time. It passes through few spaces. It uses some of the tools of the poet, image and metaphor, and also sound, which we haven't gotten to yet, but we are going to get to it in the last week. It makes use of those things to essentially create a kind of brevity, so that fewer words chase around more meaning. Well, here we come to Alice Munro, and she is going to basically challenge some of those notions of the short story. One of the reasons why we save Alice Munro for the last is because she, in many ways, quiet ways, is the most punk writer we're about to encounter this quarter. Her stories challenge brevity, and yet they stay brief also. Two of the most significant ways that they challenge brevity is by structure, okay? So they tend to be more novelistic in their structures. And then the second way so let me explain that actually. Let me go back and explain that. They pass through a lot more time and a lot more space. And yet she does it still in a short amount of page space. It's incredible. The other way that she does that is through, often through point of view. A story might have a single protagonist, as we will find out in The Love of a Good Woman, but she often has multiple viewpoint characters, that is, characters whose consciousnesses we can see into. And as you read Alice Munro, especially the first story, the title story, The Love of a Good Woman, Enid is our protagonist, make no mistake. She's our central character, but the story inhabits other characters' viewpoints. And so one of the considerations is, how do those characters' viewpoints, how do the boys, seeing into these boys' consciousnesses, how do they inform what we know about Enid's life when we get to her? We will be talking a lot about structure in The Love of a Good Woman. So as you set out to read this short story, keep in mind the arrangement. Pay close attention to the decisions that Alice Munro makes about where we are in time and where we are in space. She's going to blow your mind. All right, we're headed towards the end of the quarter. I'm so sad. Okay. Be well. take good care.